Hey, how's it going, folks? It's Hellbent, and today I'm going to release my new pCheckbox class, which is an extension upon my pButton class that I had released about 2 weeks ago, I guess. So there'll be a link in the description to the class itself. You'll have a couple options in how you can use it. Currently, I've added it to my button class script that's in my library, but you can have it as a separate script, or you can just include it in any script that you want. So the purposes of this is just to create simple checkboxes that have a little bit more option than just the default checkbox. So you have some new appearance options over the default checkbox, but it works identical. Here's a few that I just added in just before I started recording. So I got this one up here, which you probably can't read the text, but it just says test checkbox 1. You click on it, you can see that it's been checked, unchecked, checked, unchecked. Likewise, the second one, it's white when it's unchecked, green when it's checked, and I can change the colors whatever I want, and I have a whole bunch of different options that I'll go through on how you can make the appearance. Another thing you can do is perhaps maybe you want to have a checkbox that the text sits inside, so like this here, right? Or maybe I want to have the text to the right or to the left or to the below it, above it, etc. So here is with the checkbox sitting above it. And this is just one of the old buttons. So let's I guess we should start with taking a look at the class itself. The purpose of this is there's two purposes for this. One is for you to take this class and use it in your scripts as is, to be able to create quick custom checkboxes. The other purpose of this is for you not to use it as is, but for you to just take this as a concept and create your own class to do your own things. If you do happen to take that second option, be sure to share with the rest of us. You can create a pastebin link and leave a link in the description. Leave a little note saying that this is what I use to create checkboxes or buttons or whatever. Share with us. So like I said, let's take a look at the class itself. I've already added it to my pButton class, so it's in here at the bottom. I'm not going to be including any notes, so that's the purpose of this video. So if you want, take some notes while you're watching this video. It's not very difficult to do this. It's only each of these checkboxes is only going to take a tiny bit more effort than doing a normal checkbox. And then once you get used to it, like I've been doing graphical user interfaces with AutoHotkey for over 2 years now. When I first started, every time I wanted to create a button or a checkbox or whatever, I'd have to go and look up and see what the syntax and the code was and everything. But after doing it a few times, it's became second nature. The same thing goes with this kind of thing. The first couple of times you have to look, see what certain things are, but after a few times you use it, it's not a problem. So this is the class itself. The class, it has a class and a function. The function is for any subroutine that your checkbox is attached to. So this is how you would update its values and change the appearance and everything, but I'll go over more of that in a few minutes. So I've packed everything up, so it's a little bit, this is just declaring all the different variables for the object. This X, this Y, this width, this height, the text offset, and I'll go through all the different things within it afterwards, but this is just setting up the object with all the different arguments that you pass into it, and I'll go over, like I said, I'll go over what all the arguments that you have to pass into it. The next thing it does is it just goes and creates the checkbox itself. The checkbox itself consists of the image of the checkbox, the square or rectangle shape, consists of 4 layers. The bottom layer is a text field, so that way you can interact with it, because you can't attach labels to progress control, so I use a text control for me to be able to launch it. And so it's got a text control that's the exact same size as the progress bar itself. And then it's got 3 layers of progress bars. So The first progress bar is the outer trim, which is the full size of the box. Then just inside of that, there is another trim layer. So if you want to have two different colors of trim, so let me see if I can, this might be a little bit difficult to see, but I don't know if you can tell, but there's around this one here, there's a white outline, and then there's a black layer, and then there's the inner layer. So the white layer would be the first progress bar, the black layer would be the second progress bar, and then the gray color, which changes colors, is the inner layer, or the third progress bar. After that, there's just another text control, which controls all the text, and this is also attached to the label. Now, I had considered what I had considered at first was I was going to keep everything with only one label, and how I would do it was I was thinking about taking the first text control. This isn't really important, but what I was thinking of doing was taking the first text control, creating it using the dimensions of the progress, the checkbox itself, so whatever the size the square is. No, I don't want, oops, I ran the wrong thing. I ran the class. So what I was thinking was create the first text the same size as the checkbox itself, and then after I create the text, I would get the dimensions of the text using a bogus GUI, get its dimensions, and then just destroy it afterwards. But I decided, you know what, I'll just attach the same label to two things, and then that's not going to be a problem. Because for one thing, if you were to put this on top of an image or something like that, so for example, if you were to let's say you want to put these checkboxes on top of a picture of something, what would end up happening is you wouldn't be able to interact with this part of the checkbox itself. You would only be able to interact with but because I have it attached to two separate things, the text here, you would still be able to interact with it, but you wouldn't be able to interact with this part. Just as a side note, for those of you that have been trying to make this button go on top of other controls, don't worry, in the next couple of weeks I'll be making a layered version, so which is basically just another window that sits on top of this window that you can't see, and that's what has all the things that you interact with. So you'd see this button underneath an invisible layer, basically. But that's unrelated to this topic. This topic is about the checkboxes. So anyways, if you were, I'm pretty sure that if you were to put this on top of the checkboxes on top of an image, you would still be able to, hopefully, I'm pretty sure you still should be able to interact with at least the text part of the checkbox, maybe not the image, because you would be interacting with that image that's sitting underneath it. But anyways, so that's how it's built. It's just got the text controls, the dimensions. It might be complicated to read, but it's not really important, I guess, that you know what this is. It's just position so for the bottom layer, it'd be position it at the X and Y and width and height that you specified when you're creating it. Set the background to be the background color that you set for it, which I'll go on to, and then create a variable, blah blah blah. The next layer would be the same dimensions as the other one, but it would use the thickness that you specify, which we'll go into. The width is just the thickness times 2, or subtract 2 times the outer thickness, blah blah blah. Just a bunch of little bit of math, nothing serious. And then the text. The last thing that this has is a method to update, which is attached to, which gets called through this function here, which is getName. This is the thing that you're going to attach to any of the subroutines that get called when you click on your checkbox. In fact, I think right now, in a normal GUI, what you could do is you could have your checkboxes just on their own. They don't have to be attached to any subroutines. And then you have, let's say, a button. So you have 10 checkboxes, you go through them. None of them are attached to any labels, but then when you press the button, it'll submit. Though you can have it set up to submit those values. You can't do that with these. Maybe you can, but I'd have to think about how to do that. But for this, each button has to have a label, or each checkbox has to be attached to a label. You can attach all of them to the same label, but they all have to be attached to a label for it to update the values, because you can't use the same kind of GUI submit, no hide method of updating the variables. But that's it. So if it just toggles between the states, whatever you set it, so you can set the checkbox to be start with it being on or off, 0 or 1, and then if you click on it, it'll just toggle its state. If it's on, it'll change the color, etc., etc. So let's go into the actual thing. So the simplest way to do it is not to look at this. Let's ignore this and let's start from scratch. So I'm going to start with basically a brand new script. All it has is single instance force, and it has my exit hotkey. I'm just going to get my return out of the way. And I'll add GUI close. Okay. If you want, like I said, if you're only going to use the checkbox, all you'd have to do is just, if you want it to, is just copy this. Nope, this is the button. Yeah, this is the button one. So this is the checkbox class. This is all you're going to be getting in this video. You'd have to go to watch the button class one to get the button class script. But you could just take this, copy it, put it into your script somewhere down at the bottom or wherever. It's out of the way, and then now you can use it without any problems. Or, which is probably this is the way that you'd want to do it if you're sharing the script or whatever. But let's do it where we're just including it. So let's say if you put it into your library or into your library folder or whatever. So all I'm going to do is at the top of my script, I'm going to include the library that it's in. Include, and the library that it's in is Hellbent's pButton class. So I wrote this class out in this script, but then once I had it done, I just transferred it over to my button class. So that's why this one is named Hellbent's pCheckbox class. Okay, so I've included that. The next thing I want to do is, if I want to use the buttons, I would just go through the same steps that I showed during the video about using the P class, the pButton class. But we're not going to be using that, so there's no setup function or anything like that. I can go right into creating the controls. So I'm going to create a GUI. I'm going to call it number 1, and I'm going to set it to always on top. And I'm going to set a color for it. I'll make it close to a black color. I'll make a font. The font is the exact same as you would just for normal checkboxes, etc., etc. So if you want to have a different font, the only thing you need to play around with the spacing a little bit more than you might have to with a normal checkbox. But you still have to play around the spacing with normal checkboxes, so that's nothing really new with like the text beside it or whatever. Actually, no, I'm thinking edit. I'm thinking sitting beside edits. What am I doing? Font. I'll do I'll C white. Size, I'll do 12. Bold, and I'll just leave it Arial, or whatever the default is. I think it's Arial. Okay, so now I'm ready to, actually I'll show the GUI first. Show width, I'll make it 500 by 500. Okay, so that's it. Now I can just, normally it's just you go in and you add a checkbox, GUI1, add checkbox, position it X, Y, width, height, give it a variable, give it a label, give it some text on it, add the options. Is it checked? Is it not checked? Is it hidden? Is it this? Is it that? You know, style, whatever. Instead of doing that, what we're going to do is we're just going to go to the button class, or the checkbox class, and I'm going to copy its prototype. You need to, just like with the buttons, you have to name it a very specific thing, unless you're going to go in and change this function here, because this function here, it's looking for something called a pCheckbox. So unless you go into this function get name and actually change that to whatever you want to be using, or maybe you pass an argument to it or whatever, then you're going to have to, every checkbox has to be named pCheckbox. Let's one thing I did improve though is over the button, where with the name of the controls for the button, like the identifier, the associated variable for the buttons, now you can name it anything. You don't have to use the the length of the array, or the object array, which I'll go into in a second. So anyways, up at the top of my script, I'm going to create a global object, and I'm going to call it pCheckbox. It has to be pCheckbox. And then I'm going to say that pCheckbox, or progress checkbox, and I'll make this an array of objects, and I'll make this number 1, is equal to a new, now here's where we call up our class, or make a new prototype for our class. And what did I call it? I think I called it progress checkbox. Progress checkbox. So I'm going to create a new progress checkbox, and then I'm going to pass it those arguments. So hopefully I still have it in my clipboard. Yes, I do. Okay. So let's go over the arguments that you need. One is, the first argument is the window's name. So here I have, this window I've named window 1, so that's all I have to pass there. The window's name, 1. Next is the checkbox name. So the checkbox name is the whatever I want to call this checkbox, so the variable that's associated with it. So I can call it Bob if I want to. Or let's say for example, maybe this checkbox is to determine whether the GUI stays always on top or not. So maybe I'll call the variable always, or whatever. Just make sure that unless you're actually passing a variable, a pre-already made variable that contains the name into this, make sure you put quotes around it, because it is a literal string. I'm going to call this Bob. That's the name of that's the associated variable. The associated variable is Bob. And the only reason that this gets used, like we don't use this the way that we would normally use variable. This is just for changing the color and knowing which control to use. The next thing is, which label are we going to be attaching this to? I'm going to attach this to, and once again it's a string, unless you have a variable with that name in it, but chances are it's just going to be a string. I'm going to attach this to test label, and then I'm going to come down here and create that label. I'll add in a tooltip, just so that way once we get this up and running we can do a quick check. It's not gonna, I haven't added the code that's actually going to do the swap or change the values yet, but this will get triggered by clicking on it at least. Alright, the next thing is the start state. So would you want it to be checked or not checked? 0 is not checked, 1 is checked. So we'll start it off with not being checked, 0. Next is the X, Y, width, and height, and that's the box for the checkbox. And I'll do, let's say 10 for the X, 10 for the Y. I'll make it about 15 pixels wide and 15 pixels high. Next is the text offset. The text offset is basically that. How far, like after this box is drawn, how far over to the right do you want the text to start? 5 pixels is pretty good. With the Y, it's best to start with 0, and then depending on what font you're using and the size and everything like that, this is the thing that you're most likely going to have to adjust depending on the font size. But we'll start with 0. And you can use negative numbers. This is just an offset, so it takes the last position of the top position of your checkbox, and then you can just subtract from it, add to it, whatever. You can put it to the left of it, right of it, up above it, below it, just by changing these two offsets. The next one is the outer color. So you have like I said, you have an option with this that you can use. You can use both of the trim colors around the checkbox, or you can just use one of them. You can make them. You can adjust the size of them, so you can make a thick border, thin border, etc., which comes at later on. But let's go with, I'll make the background color, I'll make it white. So I'll put in here white. The inner color I'll make black. The checkbox on color I'll make lime green. Or here I'll do 00FFF, no, 00. I'll do it bright green. That's pretty much lime green. And then the off color, I'll make it a like silverish color. Actually, I'll make it silver. Next is the text that you want to see. So you can use a variable if you want. So if you have a variable, here I'll do so the text is always on top. Now here's where the border comes in. So by default you don't have to set this. It automatically has a default for 1 pixel by 1 pixel for the thickness of both of the two layers. But what you can do is, let's say for example, if I only want to have the outer layer showing, then what I can do is I can set the thickness of the outer layer to be, let's say, 1 or 2 pixels, and then for the inner layer I can set it to 0. So I'm only going to see the outer layer, so I'd only see the white. The black would be gone. But I'll do 1 pixel. I'll do 2 pixels by 2 pixels. 2 pixels by 2 pixels. So the outer layer is going to have a 2 pixel trim around it, and then the inner layer is going to have a 2 pixel trim around it, and then the inside of that. And that's it. We've created a progress bar. So I mean a checkbox. So let's go ahead and run that. And there we go. So this is the one I created. So now I can see, okay, do I want to adjust the height of my text? This is the Y offset right here. So I'll move it up a little bit, which would be like -1 or 2 pixels. Maybe I'll go up another pixel. I'll move it up to 3, -3. Okay. Right, so you just play around with it, and if I want to, let's say for example, if I was to change the height to, let's say 55, so I can create some weird looking checkboxes. So I'll put this, let's say 10. No, a little bit more. Right, so I can create all kinds of different random shapes and whatever. I can put the text on the other side. So let's see if I want the text to actually be on the opposite side. How would I go about doing that? Well, first of all, I need to make sure that I move this over. So this is the X position of my checkbox. I need to move it over. Let's go about 150, and then I'll see where that is. Alright, so now I'm going to take the X offset for my text and I'm going to subtract from it. So let's go about negative 120. And that's not enough, so I'll go negative 130. And there we go. So now I've swapped the sides for it. If I want to make the checkbox, let's say I want the checkbox to sit inside of it. I'll move this back down to 10. I'll make its width to be about 150. And we'll see what that looks like. So that's pretty close. And then I come in here and change this so that way you can see it a little better. What color do I want? Let's go. That's pretty hard to see. Right, and then I can just play around with the Y, move it down a little bit. But you know, whatever. So that's how you that's it. That's how you add a checkbox. The only thing that we have left is actually being able to interact with it. Like so you can see that right now I'm actually launching that thread, but we need to actually make it so that way we can change the value of our checkbox, so that we can use it in scripting, obviously, and so that way we can change its appearance, so that way we know it's been checked or not. So the only thing we need to do is just include that other function, and that other function is getName. And the argument you're going to pass into it is the control that launched this thread. So instead of name, you're using a GUI control, and that's it. So that's that. So let's go ahead and run this and see what we get. So there we can see we're changing colors, and now we'll test to see if the value. How do we test the value? So right now, this is the part that's a little bit of a pain in the butt. But what you can do is you can, once you have things set up or whatever, you can swap the names of the variables. But anyways, so I know that this one here, is the thing that I'm looking for. So I'm just going to check to say if pCheckbox, and then the number that I'm looking for. I'm looking for checkbox 1 dot is the variable is on. So this is the variable that holds its state. So you can change that variable. Maybe later on I'll change it myself, but for now it's this. It is on. So is it on? So does it equal 1? If it's on, then we'll do I have sound on? Yes, I do. I'll do a sound beep of 550 hertz. Else, no else. Alright, so if it's on, it's going to play a beep. Right, or it does whatever. It does whatever I want it to do. Now, like I said, this gets a little bit to be a bit of a pain in the butt, typing out this all the time. So what you can do, for example, is if this is the label that's going to be checking this, perhaps I could create a new variable. I already created actually I already have a variable up there. It's called Bob. I'm trying to. I don't want to make edits to this when I'm doing a video, because I don't know if there's going to be any problems. But what I'm thinking is, that, because usually you're going to be probably used to doing it the same way as I am. So you have a variable, let's say for that checkbox that I want to represent always on top, I might associate a variable called always or something like that, and then check its value. So maybe in here, this is the update. So when you click on it, this is the thing that changes the state. So maybe there could be probably a rework to rework the state to be the same worked in with the name. But what I'm thinking is maybe I'm gonna add this in, and then I'm gonna remove it afterwards. So if you want to, you can add this in as well. But what I'm thinking is I can take this dot name and I can set it to equal 1. No, I can't. No, I can't. How would I go about doing that? Okay, so I'd have to. It would take me a couple of minutes to probably think about that, but maybe what I could do, in here is instead of having it sound beep, I could do something like the variable, let's say Bob, because that's what I called it, Bob : equals 1. And here I'd actually have to do unless this is its own. See, this is a problem. I shouldn't complicate things like this, because if you don't know what you're doing, this is really going to confuse things. But if I'm attaching multiple, see, right now, here, let me copy that. Right now, as it is, I can attach all my checkboxes to the same label, and they're all going to update their values. They're all going to change the proper checkbox and everything like that. But what I want to do now is I actually want to make it so that way I don't have to type out pCheckbox and then the index of that checkbox is on in the rest of my code. Like if I'm creating code that's going to be checking to see if that variable equals 0 or 1, I don't want to type out pCheckbox 1 or 2 or 5 or whatever is on, right? I want to just type out Bob. Does Bob equal 1? Does Bob equal 0? Right? But in order for me to do that, I need to, in here I'd have, maybe I can create a function or something like that. It wouldn't be a problem to have it long windowed like this, but let's say if I have 10 checkboxes, that means I have 10 conditions that I have to test. If pCheckbox 1 is on equals 1, then that associated variable with it equals 1. Else, if pCheckbox 1 does not, then change Bob to equal 0. Right? So it's simpler to just use the pCheckbox 1, but I don't want to type that out all the time. I would rather have a long label here, or maybe pass it to a function or something like that that'll go through it like this, and so that way I can use the actual variable that I would use in a normal way. So if it equals 0, I just want to see if this would actually work. Alright, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a hotkey to actually test the value of Bob. See, this isn't part of the class. This isn't part of the class. This is extra. This is trying to make it a little bit more user-friendly. I'm going to test, I'm just going to pop up a tooltip with the value of Bob. And now I don't even know if this is going to work, because I haven't tested this. I haven't tested trying to use this. It should, theoretically, I think it should work, but I don't know. Let's see. I think I'm good. All right, so if I hit number pad 1, I should get the state that it's currently in, which I think is no. I'm going to get nothing. I'm thinking I should get nothing. And okay, I pressed number pad 1, I got nothing. Alright, if I click on this and then hit number pad 1, I believe that I should get a 1. I'm hoping what I want is a 1. And I got a 1. Okay. If I do it again, do I get a 0? Yes, I do. Okay. So that's how, this is what I would do. I would actually do this for every checkbox. I would go through, use that associated variable, because I'm used to using things more like, you know, like, what would it be a good one? I don't know. On lock something. So I have some checkbox that locks some controls. Unlock buttons. So I have a checkbox that locks or unlocks buttons, right? And I would name the variable something like that. So I would go through and on unlock buttons. Right? And then I hit number pad 1, I get a 1. I hit number pad 1, I get a 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. Okay. But like I said, if I want to do it like this, I would have to do it for every single checkbox. And then in, let's say, the rest of my code or whatever. So let me create another hotkey, for example. So let's say let's say that this wasn't a hotkey. This was I pressed a button. So right now I'm attaching it to a hotkey button. Let's just assume that it's a button. Actually, you know what? Let's do that. Go to what do I want to do in here? I'm going to say if unlock button I'm going to create something. One 200. So I've created a button that I'm set to be hidden to begin with. So I'm going to say if the unlock buttons equals 1, I'm going to say go ahead and show else okay. Okay, so right now there should be another button sitting about here. If I hit this, it's going to do nothing because this is off. It should do nothing. If I turn this on and if I hit this now, knock on wood, but it should show me that other button. And there we go. Right, and if I do the reverse. Okay, so you can see this is basically how you would go about coding with it. You can add as many checkboxes. So let's go ahead and add one last checkbox, and then we'll get out of here. I know I take so long, but this is my time. I don't want to re-record. I don't want to make a like. There's no value in it for me to make this a professional video. If you want to use it, if you want to watch the video, that's great for you. But it's not really worth it for me to create a full lesson plan out of a video like this. So if it takes, you know, an hour, I don't care. If you don't want to watch, that's your call. So I'm just going to create one more. I mean, as soon as I introduced the class, you could have left. I'm going to create another one. P. Here I'll do the push method. So it's pCheckbox. So I can also push dot. So because I'm using an array of objects, I can just push a new checkbox onto that array. So this one will end up being checkbox number 2. But inside of here, I'm just going to do new progress checkbox. And then inside of there, I just do the arguments. Window 1, I'm going to call this always. I'm going to attach this to label. I'm going to create a generic label for submitting all the values of my checkboxes. So I'm going to submit this to. Before I continue, if you have the class for the buttons, as you might have been aware of, you can't attach any other controls to it. Like any label that's attached to the buttons, you can have multiple buttons attached to the same subroutine or label, but you can't attach any other controls. With this one though, you can attach other non-P buttons to the label. So for example, this is attached to the test label. I can attach any controls that I want within this, because it's going to pass to that function which will sort out what it's doing. Maybe I'll come back to it later on and fix up the button class so that way you can do the same thing with it. But for now, if any label, I can have multiple buttons to the same P buttons going to the same label, but I can't have any other controls. But with the checkbox, you can, as long as they're not those P buttons. So I'm going to attach this to, I'm going to attach it to create a label that's generic. So submit all. What's the next argument? 0. What is that? Is the checkbox on or not? Okay, it's on. The X I'm going to make 50, Y 200. Width, I'll make it a tiny little checkbox, 10 by 10. And the offset, I'll make 5 pixels for the X, for the text to be X plus 5, and for the Y, I'll just leave it zeroed out. I think I'll just leave it zeroed out for now. What's my next things? The colors. I'll make it red. I'll make it as ugly as possible. Yellow. Purple. And olive. Really ugly button. Checkbox. What's my next thing? The text that I want to have shown next to it. What do I want to have? And then my offsets, I'm just going to leave them at 1, 1, so I don't even need to add them. And we should have, knock on wood, but it should work. What did I do wrong? Target, oh yes, I created a label that doesn't exist. My submit all label. Oh wait, I actually want to, because I'm using that, I need to call my function getName. Okay, there we go. That's it. Should work, no problem. Okay, so here's my ugly looking thing. If I click on it, it changes it to olive and whatever. Where did that go? Oh yes, that has to be on. Yeah, there we go. Okay, anyways, that's it. Like I said, I'll leave in the description this class here. So because I don't have any of those buttons, so what I'll do is actually I'll just show you one time. Like I said, you can leave it anytime you want. I just want to make sure everyone's clear on as much things as I possibly can. I'm going to copy this class. I'm going to come in here to the bottom, and I'm going to paste it in. And I'm going to, instead of including this, I'm going to get rid of this include. And it should work just the same. Alright. Okay, that's it. Like I said, let me know if you create any updates to this, or if you add anything or whatever. Just leave a link to like a pastebin page or something like that. Sometimes they go to my spam folder, but I'll make sure that if it's legit, I'll make sure that I'll make sure that it gets seen by anyone who wants to see it. So if you're watching this, if you watch this, make sure you look down in the comments. Maybe somebody's created something that's a little bit better than this, a little bit more advanced. But that's it. Peace.